Wow, what an incredibly beautiful planet this is. I sure do love exploring the galaxy. You know, I think I'll take a pebble as a memento mori. Oh my god, who? Oh, okay, I'll leave the pebble. I'll leave the pebble. If you've played No Man's Sky, you know about the Sentinels. And if you haven't played No Man's Sky, you're about to learn about the Sentinels. Because these mechanical beings float around everywhere in the galaxy of No Man's Sky. But they leave some questions. What are they? Who are they? And where do they come from? Now, today we're going to explore all of those questions, but since who are they and where do they come from is going to be a little complicated, we're going to start out first with the easy one of what are the Sentinels? Sentinels themselves are mechanical beings that float around all the different worlds of the galaxy and observe what's going on. And I think we should start out with the first Sentinel, the Sentinel drone, because this is kind of the Sentinel patrol unit. They are stationed on planets and they just sit there and they observe. On low activity Sentinel planets, they'll guard specific points of interest. On high activity Sentinel planets, they'll be flying around the whole planet making sure you don't do anything funky like take their fancy rocks. However, if you do take their fancy rocks or chop a space crab in half or something, these Sentinels are going to get very upset with you, which we'll talk about why later. But for now, just they will get upset and they're going to start calling in all sorts of other Sentinels from this entire list I'm about to go through here. Now, after you've pissed off the Sentinels, the first thing they're going to call in is the Sentinel Heavy Combat Drone, which is very similar to the normal Sentinel drone, except more heavily armored and more heavily armed. There's likely millions upon billions of these around the galaxy that Sentinels can teleport in if they need, but they're a very common enemy, and they're not that hard to take down. And what Sentinel force wouldn't be complete without a repair drone to come in and fix up all the Sentinels that are doing the fighting? Sentinels obviously care about preserving the planets they're on, but they also care about self-preservation. So they've created these Sentinel repair drones that will come along with their fighting forces to fix up the drones that are damaged during combat. Now, here's where the Sentinels come in a real interesting drone. As you continue fighting them, they'll call in these summoner drones. Now, normally Sentinels only pop into existence when you upgrade your level of anger with them, but these Sentinel drones here, they can summon in enemies mid-fight. And if you don't take out these Sentinels, they're just going to keep calling in more and more drones to come fight you. Now, to the player, these Sentinel drones are a wild increase in technology of the Sentinels, because if you look at them, they have the ability to warp in other enemies even though they are fairly small themselves, meaning the Sentinels must have miniaturized their warp technology enough to fit in just this little drone that floats around. And it kind of makes you wonder about how the Sentinels are warped in at different stages of the battle, which we will talk about later, and might blow your mind a little if you don't know the surprise that's coming up. But for now, on to the next Sentinel. If you continue fighting the Sentinels and keep pissing them off, eventually they're going to call in a Sentinel Quad, which essentially is just a giant Sentinel dog. However, this dog is not friendly and fluffy. This dog has a giant laser in its face it's going to try to melt you with. But this Sentinel unit here is the first one that is substantially bigger than the rest. You never just see these randomly wandering on planets. These they have to call in specifically, which kind of brings up an interesting idea about the Sentinels, that they probably are very careful about what resources they use where. Well, it may seem like they have unlimited resources, they probably don't, and then these bigger creations they're only sending to the much more serious threats. Now, if you've dealt with the Sentinel dogs, they're going to keep sending in even bigger stuff. Next up, they've got the Sentinel Hardframe Battle Mech, which is a giant bipedal walker that has some serious firepower to come take out you, the player. And you may notice, if you've played the game a lot, this looks fairly similar to the player's Minotaur they can use. And they do have a very similar setup. Large walker, lots of firepower, and they're so similar in fact, actually, that as you defeat these Sentinel hard-frame battle mechs, some of the things they drop you can use to upgrade your Minotaur itself. This likely shows that inhabitants of the galaxy developed the Minotaur after they saw these Sentinel hard-frame battle suit mech thing. It's a long name. But they likely developed the Minotaur after dealing with these things and maybe taking one down and being left with a disabled husk, and they're like, hey, maybe we repurpose this thing to fight for us against the Sentinels. But this is not a video on the Minotaur, this is a video on the Sentinels, so we're gonna get back to the list of Sentinels here. Oh, wise Sentinel of the Lake, what is your wisdom for me? Subscribe to Nate's Games Box. What the hell does that mean? Subscribe to Nate's Games Box or else. Okay, I'll do it. Now, if you have really pissed the Sentinels off, you've reached the highest level of their anger, they're going to summon in a Sentinel Walker, which is the most difficult, land-based, enemy that they have. This Sentinel Walker here has 3 different health bars on it. It's got a brain cage, an inner core, and leg armor. And you're going to need to work through all these health bars if you want to defeat them. But the Walker itself points towards the Sentinels thinking like, man, we might need to take out some really serious threats, because they gave this thing a giant laser to beam you with, projectile cannons. It's got everything to take down any threat it could run into. Unless you're able to defeat it, then the Sentinels are kind of out of luck. But this Sentinel Walker is the most advanced piece of technology they have on land. Now, you may have noticed in talking about the Walker there, I kept mentioning on land specifically, because the Sentinels aren't just on planets. They have spaceships as well. May I present to you the Sentinel Interceptor? The Sentinel Interceptor is the basic space Sentinel unit. Now, the Sentinel Interceptor is similar in size to the player's ship, and was likely built as a response to the Sentinels knowing, man, the various species around the galaxy are beginning to become spacefaring. We're going to have to be able to manage them while they're in space. Let's make an interceptor. And these interceptors will spawn if you do something in space that pisses the Sentinels off and they see it, or if you try to leave a planet where you have a wanted level. They'll call in these interceptors to take you out, because, you know, the Sentinels on the planet, if you just try to go into space to escape from them, they can't have that happening, so they'll call in their interceptor buddies to take you out. Now, if you take out enough Sentinel interceptors, much like the drones on the ground, they're going to be very mad about that and start sending in stronger units. Now, space has a little less variety because you only have the interceptors, and then the Sentinel capital ship, which is a massive capital ship that the Sentinels have. They will come and try to take out these much more serious threats in space. The capital ship itself can summon more interceptors. It's got cannons on it. This thing is a serious threat to anything in the galaxy. And this shows you that the Sentinels likely knew they were going to have to face off some more serious threats in space. Like, you can't just take out a massive capital ship with only an interceptor. Even though in the gameplay, how you take out the Sentinel capital ship is with your interceptor, but that's not to the point. They likely figured they needed a capital ship to take out much more serious threats like rogue freighters and whatnot. And it shows the Sentinels are really planning ahead of what threats they need to face in the galaxy. Now, I've talked about all the Sentinel units that can fly around and fight you, but I haven't talked about the Sentinel buildings yet, because there is a couple Sentinel buildings in the game that are quite interesting. If on a planet, you're able to defeat the Sentinel Walker and clear all 5 wanted levels, this will show you the location of a Sentinel Pillar. The Sentinel Pillar is a highly armored and highly defended Sentinel building located on planets. Now, when you go to the Sentinel building, it does not attack you, but you can interact with it and it'll tell you interesting lore about the Sentinels game itself and give you some weapons. Now, there is one more Sentinel building to talk about, but in order to do that, we're going to have to talk about the corrupted Sentinels. Because sometimes on dissonant planets, they call them, where there's this dark energy bubbling up, the Sentinels of that planet get corrupted. They grow weird purple crystals out of the side of them, and they start to act a little differently. Now, there's only 2 corrupted Sentinel units. You've got the normal corrupted Sentinel drone, and then the corrupted Sentinel quadruped. But they act differently because they don't care about the exact same things as normal Sentinel drones. Normal Sentinel drones will be really mad if you take anything from their planets. These corrupted ones only seem to care about their purple crystals and gravitino balls. And so if you're mining these crystals, the levels don't work up the same way like a normal planet. Like, if you keep mining the crystals, only the Sentinels very local to you attack you, and then they'll just be done. You pick up one of those gravitino balls, oh, well, they're going to get pissed, and they're going to call in those corrupted Sentinel quadrupeds. Now, onto that final building I mentioned from the Sentinels here, we have the Dissonance Resonator, which, again, only happens on these corrupted planets, and that's why we're discussing them now. These Dissonance Resonators appear to be giant mining rigs that are pulling the dark energy out of the planet itself. I'm guessing that these Dissonance Resonators here got constructed by the Sentinels after they were corrupted, because they got corrupted by these weird purple crystals and said, man, we gotta get more of these purple crystals. Quick, put together a mining rig. So instead of, like, on a normal planet where the Sentinels might try to set up Sentinel pillars as bases, they set up these Dissonant Resonators to keep getting those sweet, sweet purple crystals that the corrupted Sentinels love so much. And I think it goes without saying, but if you attack these Dissonant Resonators, the Sentinels are going to be very pissed, because you're messing with their fancy purple crystals and dark energy. But if you're able to take down a Dissonant Resonator, you might get the location of a fancy Sentinel ship you can use, so that's something. So, that about wraps up what are the Sentinels. Let's start moving on to the who and the where did they come from, the Sentinels. At this point, I'm going to have to put a big spoiler warning right here, because so far just talking about the Sentinels in the game, it doesn't tell you much if you haven't gotten to that point in the game. But now, I'm going to talk about why the Sentinels are here, and that is kind of blowing apart the entire story of the game. So if you want to focus on the story yourself, you don't want to learn yet, I would suggest you click off here, and thank you for watching. But if you do want to learn more about the Sentinels, let's get into it. Now, to talk about who the Sentinels are, it would probably be best to go through every single fine point of the lore and how the Sentinels interact with each various part of the story, but That would take way too long for this video, and it would just get far too extensive, so I'm going to try to focus in on the points of what it really mattered to the Sentinels lore. Now, the first and most important thing about the Sentinels is they are very closely associated with Atlas. Atlas created the Sentinels to be record keepers of the galaxy that it created. They were originally invisible creations that worked behind the scenes to categorize data, store data, and remove errors that showed up in a simulation. Oh, yeah, that's right. If you were unaware, and here's the big shocker, the galaxy we play in is in fact a simulation created by Atlas. Anyways, back to the Sentinels after that giant jaw dropper. Yes, so Sentinels were invisible behind the scenes kind of data keepers and logbook managers. But Atlas decided that they wanted to give Sentinels a physical body. Now, this was widely seen by the Sentinels as the greatest mistake ever and the beginning of the downfall. That is because when Atlas gave them these physical bodies, they didn't give them any further instructions. They just gave them a physical body and said, here you go, continue to do what you're doing. They're like, oh, we have physical bodies now, how do we do that? So they began to wander the galaxy and explore and become record keepers in a physical form. And once they encountered the Korvax, they loved the Korvax because they were another mechanical species in the galaxy. And the Korvax decided to start worshipping them because suddenly another mechanical species just came out of the sky and they started worshipping Atlas and the Sentinels themselves. Atlas saw this and saw how its Sentinels were interacting with the Korvax and decided it wanted to give them an even more powerful sentience, a bigger presence in the galaxy, something to think and contemplate with. So Atlas decided to give Korvax Prime, the planet of the Korvax, sentience itself, and the Sentinels and Korvax managed this other sentience as kind of a tri-force of sentient machines. Now, through all sorts of other activities that happened in the galaxy leading up to this point, the Gek decided to invade Korvax Prime and mine it for its resources, destroying that sentience that the Atlas created and the Korvax and Sentinels loved so much. They just mined it for profits. And this is why the Sentinels hate you mining so much. When you're walking around and you're picking up those fancy pebbles and various minerals, the Sentinels absolutely hate it because they still remember when Korvax Prime was destroyed, and they have vowed to keep any other planet from being destroyed in a similar manner. So if they hear mining, they just freak out. They're kind of like when a beaver hears running water. And now that I've mentioned a random animal fact, it's time for an interruption for Animal Facts with Nate. Beavers, in fact, don't exactly hate the sound of running water. It's just instinctually built into their bodies that if they hear running water, they need to dam it up. This is how they're going to get food. This is how they're going to build homes. If there's running water around, they just freak out and they start trying to dam it up. So if you put a beaver in, say, a water park and there's running water all over the place, they'd probably freak out and start trying to dam up everything. This has been Animal Facts with Nate. Back to the video about the Sentinels. So Sentinels can be viewed in kind of the same light here as beavers, which is an absolutely wild thing to say, but the analogy works, so we're going to keep going. To them, it's an instinct. If they see and hear mining, they have to stop it, because instinctually, they're like, we need to save Korvax Prime. So if they see mining and anything like that anywhere in the galaxy, they're like, we gotta stop this. We gotta stop the Gek, and they just start destroying everything once they hear this resource collection going on. And another key conclusion we can draw from all this knowledge is that I mentioned that the Sentinels are cut off from Atlas Prime. They no longer have a connection to the giant being that's created them. And this is how you end up with Sentinels with so many different personalities, you could call them, and how they act differently on each planet. Some planets, they're more extreme, because these Sentinels are just that much more instinctually tuned to stop mining, whereas other planets, the Sentinels are more relaxed. Maybe they see that a little resource collection is not bad, and it may actually be good for the planet and help manage everything that's going on there. And this also shows how some of the Sentinels got corrupted. Since they were cut off from Atlas and they were just trying to defend the galaxy, they mined up these purple crystals that just destroyed their coding, destroyed their very being itself, and caused them to be corrupted and fall to kind of like this chaotic dark energy. Now, I could go on talking about interesting bits of Sentinel lore forever. There's tons of interesting bits we could discuss, like how the Sentinels poison the Gek, or how you can find a friendly Sentinel named Laylaps. But this video's gotten long enough, and I think those are best saved for other videos. And if you did enjoy this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because this has been kind of a break from my normal type of video. I've made Helldivers content for like about a year now, but I thought it's time to change it up a little. It's time to play some other games too. And if you're a regular Helldivers watcher, don't worry, there will be more Helldivers videos, but I wanted to break it up, so I'd love to hear your comments below on what you thought about this video, since it's a break from my normal content a little bit. If you did really enjoy it, I'd love you to hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And with that, thanks, and I'll see you guys next time.